All right, what is going on, guys? Long time no see. Yeah, I don't even know how to begin this. I feel so excited coming back and finally making another one of these videos talking about movies, a passion of mine that I truly love. Sorry that I've been gone for so long. It's just that I went to Mexico and I thought I could have things planned out, but it was just so hectic and I didn't have the resources to really, upload videos and all that stuff. And then I came back and school was starting up and school already has started, so I've been just busy. But since it's Labor Day weekend, or not even the weekend anymore, technically it's Monday, but no school today. So I decided to record a video and talk about some of the movies that I watched over the summer and primarily talking about movies that I watched I went down a rabbit hole watching Quentin Tarantino movies. I watched four. I didn't watch Reservoir Dogs. I didn't watch Kill Bill. I didn't watch a lot of some of his other famous movies. What I did watch was Pulp Fiction, Django. Um, I watched Inglorious Bastards and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. No, I want to just talk to you guys about what I liked about all those movies. I want to go a little in depth into each movie, not too in depth because it would take me too long to really go fully in depth into each one of those movies. But I just want to talk about some of the things that I really, really liked about each movie. So let's get started. I guess we'll go in order of well, I'm trying to figure out. So I think we'll talk quickly on each movie. We'll go in order from which one I watched first to the last one that I watched, and then we'll talk about each one, like what I liked overall, plot and like all that stuff, characters, and then we'll go a little bit more in depth into each movie, into the things that I noticed about each movie that Quentin loves to do, and specific unique details that I really enjoyed about each specific movie. So let's do that first. So I first watched Django. Now this is before I actually went to Mexico. This was like a couple days before I watched Django, and I absolutely love the movie. Immediately, I absolutely adored the movie. I loved the character of Dr. King Schultz. I thought he was an amazing character. I loved Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Candy. I loved I'm blanking. Oh my gosh. Jamie Foxx. Sorry, I could not think of his name. We'll cut out all that silence. I couldn't think of his name. Jamie Foxx. I loved Jamie Foxx's character, Django, obviously. The whole movie was great. The pacing of it was really cool. I don't know, Quentin just has a very unique style, which we'll get into, and I think overall the movie was great. It was a good love story. All the hardships Django had to go through, and the fact that he was able to find a white man that could take him in and actually treat him like a normal human being during that time was something special. And their chemistry between Django and Dr. King Schultz, who played Dr. I can't think of the actor's name that played Christopher Waltz. All right, we'll cut that out too. Oh man, it took me a minute to. But Christopher Waltz, I loved him, and he deserved the Oscar for playing Dr. King Schultz. And later down, actually before Django, he played Hans Landa in Inglourious Basterds, and we'll get into that. I absolutely love that. But the movie itself was very dark. A lot of his movies are really dark. There's a lot of things that you'll notice about each movie, and they're all dark, but at the same time, they all have such a good story to tell. And Django, I absolutely adored it. Moving on, the next movie I watched was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is actually the next one that I watched. I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or it might have been Pulp Fiction. No, 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 it wasn't Pulp Fiction. It was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'd never watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All of these movies I'd never watched. I know it sounds crazy, but I never got into Quentin Tarantino. I heard all the hype and I thought, he probably is a good director, so I should probably watch his movies. And I watched all of them. Well, not all of them, but I watched, those four. And I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Next. And man, what a cool story, man. The story, there's just so many cool little interesting details about it that, once again, I said I'll go further in depth into. But I loved Brad Pitt's character. I loved Leo's character and all this. So I loved Margot Robbie's character too, Sharon Tate, Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio. I thought all those were pretty much the three main leads, the three main protagonists. More so Rick Dalton than Cliff Booth and Sharon Tate, but I love the three of them. Even though honestly we didn't get to see a lot of interactions between Rick Dalton, Cliff Booth, and Sharon Tate. It was mainly just Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton, which is actually something that I'll touch on about that duo and how Quentin Tarantino loves to to do his movies in duos, you know. But the movie itself was great. The story is great, based off of, well, it's funny because it's based off of true events, but he kind of morphs the true events into his own story, which is really cool because it really plays into the title, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's this, in real life, it's this sad story about this young actress who had such a bright future. She was pregnant. She got murdered by the Manson family. So it's like this movie is like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sharon Tate survived, lived her life, and all that. But it was just Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's just, what if? It's sort of like a what if story, and it's sad, but at the same time, it's like so like it's such a beautiful story. There's just so many things, but all in all, it's great. I love the story of, Rick Dalton, this like actor who's going down in his career, finding, his way through his modern day Hollywood, and Cliff Booth, this stunt man who has a lot of skeletons, a couple skeletons in his closet, and how a lot of people don't really trust him too much because of those skeletons, with the whole thing with his wife and all that, and how, I love the dynamic between Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth. It was great. And like I said, this sad story of like, oh, what if Sharon Tate survived, it's a sad story, but at the same time, the story plays out in a very fun way, with the climax, obviously, with Rick Dalton burning alive the Manson children. Well, one of them at least, in his pool, and then Cliff Booth just absolutely, him and his dog. I forget his dog's name, but him and his dog absolutely mauling the other Manson children that were meant to go kill Sharon Tate that night, which is how it went down in real life. They killed Sharon Tate. They murdered her and her friends in her house that night. But in the movie, it plays out as if they go to Rick Dalton's house instead of Sharon Tate's house, and Sharon Tate ends up surviving and all that, and Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth have sort of a fairy tale ending. It's a great movie. I highly recommend it. And by the end of this video, I'll rank all the movies, and say what I just give final thoughts, but I'll rank them all, say which one's my favorite, which one, all that. But all in all, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, amazing movie. Now going into the next movie that I watched, Pulp Fiction, which, I mean, Pulp Fiction is credited to be like one of the greatest movies of all time, and I mean, I have to say, it really is. It lives up to its hype, if I'm being honest. I absolutely love this movie. And one of the main things that stands out about this movie, and what stands out in all Quentin Tarantino movies, is the dialogue. The dialogue and the interactions between all the characters in these movies. It's absolutely amazing. Quentin Tarantino is a master writer, master director, but his writing is so good, and the dialogue that we see between like these characters, between John Travolta's character and Alright, sorry, I had to pull up the cast because once again I'm blanking on names. I'm sorry, I'm just not that good at remembering. But the interactions we see between the two main characters, John Travolta's character and Samuel L. Jackson's character, Jules and Vincent, is great. I mean, I absolutely loved it. Like they're when we first see them and they're talking about like, a royale with cheese, or talking about just like dumb shit like that real dudes in real life, like, that's like a conversation you would have with a friend, and that's why it feels so relatable and so just so honest. It's just a regular conversation, two guys talking about a fucking cheeseburger from France or some shit. You know what I mean? It's just very cool. And I love how Jules, I don't know, there's just so many cool details of how Jules, like, whenever he's about to kill a motherfucker, he quotes the Bible. This is so much. And then you got Butch's characters, played by Bruce Willis, which was another very cool character that we got to see. But the two main protagonists are obviously Vincent and Jules, and we get to follow them. Quentin also, yeah, he cameos in this movie. Quentin Tarantino cameos in a couple of his cameos in Django too. And yeah, the whole story is just so cool, because this story is, I believe, the only one that truly takes a non-linear form of storytelling, not telling, right? It goes non-linear. We get to see the beginning of Jules and Vincent going to go kill these guys, right? And then out of nowhere, they just somehow they end up in these like weird clothes, like these like weird t-shirts, and they show up to the place, right? And then slowly we get to see how this all unfolds. We get to see Butch and the whole GIMP scene with him and that one. Forget the other dude's guy, the other dude, the black guy. I forget his name, but we see what happened there. That was very dark. That was like super dark. I think that was one of the most darkest scenes. And in all of his movies. That whole Gimp situation, like that is really, really dark. Like I was not expecting that whatsoever. And then we get to see what happened, obviously, with Vincent and Jules and why they had those strange clothes on because they killed that one dude in the car and they got a bunch of blood. And that was just a really cool scene of them going to like Quint. I forget the character's name of Quentin, like the character that Quentin Tarantino plays in Pulp Fiction, but they go to his house and they call up this guy. I think his name is the Wolf or something. And they just like have this whole scene of them like cleaning the car, cleaning themselves up, and then we get to see how that all happened. But in the very beginning of the movie, I forgot to mention this, we get that scene in the cafe where those two the one English student, the other English girl are in the cafe talking about robbing the place, and they end up, robbing the place, but then we actually get to see how it fully plays out by the end of the movie. What happens, we also see that Vincent actually dies in the middle of the movie because of Butch. Butch kills him. I don't know, there's so much to talk about. I know I'm all over the place and you're probably not getting a lot of what's happening, but I mean, just go watch the movie, right? Like, and you'll get the whole thing. But for people that have watched the movie, they would understand what I'm trying to say. But I'm all over the place. But it's just it's such a crazy movie. Like it feels it, and part of the reason why I'm all over the place with the movie because I feel that the movie itself is all over the place, but in a good way, in a magisterial way, in just a perfect way. Because it's non-linear, right? It follows a non-linear form of storytelling. It doesn't start from point A and then goes to point B. It goes from like point A, then it goes to like point C and then D and then back to B and then back to like it goes in a very cool direction. And so I absolutely, objectively speaking, Pulp Fiction is the best movie out of all the four movies. Now, we'll get into this later, but overall, Pulp Fiction, amazing movie. It's such a crazy movie. It's such a fun ride, and I don't know, it's just so much to unpack with the movie. But I just wanted to say some of the things that I really liked about it without, going too crazy in depth. Maybe one of these days I'll make a full in-depth review on Pulp Fiction and actually go, have a much more structured, you know, um, breakdown of the movie. But my quick thoughts on it. Those are my quick thoughts. And moving on to the final movie that I watched, Inglourious Bastards. And what a movie. Another one of those movies that I just absolutely... Inglourious Bastards for me is one of my top 10 personal favorite movies I've seen. I gotta be honest, that movie's fucking amazing. Oh my gosh, the opening scene with Hans Landa and Lapadite, Mr. Lapadite, I believe. What a scene, man. Oh my gosh, the tension that you feel knowing that this is an SS officer in during World War II in Nazi occupied France in 1940, somewhere around there, or no, it was in 1930, somewhere around there, and just knowing that that this guy is just he's a Jew killer, he's a Jew hunter, that's his nickname, and he's in this guy's house and he's looking for Jews, and the slow revelation, the slow what is it called, I guess, just revelation of the fact that no, there are Jews hiding in this guy's house, and we have an SS officer here questioning this guy, asking him if there's Jews hiding in his house, and the fact is that Hans Landa already knew that the Jews were hiding in this guy's house. He already knew, but he just wanted to play this game with this guy and just like really make his life miserable because his daughters were there. He had his daughters, obviously, and I don't know, there's just so many cool, like, you can watch a lot of cool breakdowns of that scene on YouTube, and how Landa like grabs like some of his daughter's hands, like the eye contact he makes with some of Lapidite's daughters, and like the way he takes out his pipe as he's about to uncover, or how he already knows that there are Jewish people hiding in this guy's house, but he just wanted to play along with this game and just like make this guy feel safe, but he already knew. It's just, oh my gosh, amazing storytelling, amazing writing, amazing directing, and amazing acting once again by Christopher Waltz. This guy is such a good fucking actor, and he won the Oscar again for this performance. This was his first performance playing a character for Quentin Tarantino. Then he played Django and won the Oscar again. I mean, and it's totally deserved. Hans Landa, I mean, what a fucking villain, man. What an amazing villain. Holy crap, dude. And then we have Brad Pitt again in this movie, but I'm focusing a lot on this scene in the beginning because there's so many cool things. Like, another little detail is that Hans Landa, he speaks four different languages, five maybe. I think he speaks Spanish, Italian, German, French, and English, so 5, I believe. And obviously he's in France, so this guy, Lapadite, he only speaks French and English, and he knows this. So he speaks French with him in the beginning, to act cordial, because that's his native tongue. That's this guy's native language in his native country. But then he knows that there's Jewish people in the house, and he knows that they're French, so they most likely only speak French. But he knows La Petite also speaks English, so he switches to English so that the Jewish people don't hear him, and so that they don't find out that he knows that they're there. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that's just crazy writing, right? And another amazing scene. I'm sorry if I'm going too into detail, but it's just, dude, I mean, I love this. This is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. Objectively speaking, I think Pulp Fiction is better, but this is my personal. Inglourious Basterds is my personal favorite. And the scene with Shoshana, which is one of the, because the people that were hiding in Lapidite's house was a family, right? You had Shoshana, and then her brothers, I think, and her parents. They all end up dying except for Shoshana. She's the only one that's able to escape the house that day when Landa comes in and is looking for them. And Landa lets her go. He straight up says, Au revoir, Shoshana, which if in French, au revoir means, I believe, until we meet again. There's two different ways to say goodbye in French. There's au revoir, and then there's another one that I'm forgetting, but I mean, I don't speak French. But one of them means like, okay, goodbye. We won't really see each other again, so just goodbye. We won't see each other again in a long time. And then au revoir, the other way to say goodbye is if you're gonna see someone again soon. And like that's just crazy to think that, Landa would just say au revoir to this girl who's running away, and he lets her run away, knowing that, yeah, we'll meet again. And they do meet again. Obviously we're skipping a couple steps, but Shoshana, she owns a French movie theater. There's this one Nazi like star boy, this one Nazi higher, not too high up in command, but this sort of like this up and coming guy, this Nazi up and coming guy, this war hero. And he really likes Shoshana, falls in love with her, and like asks her out, multiple times. Shoshana obviously hates this guy because he's a Nazi and she's a Jew, and so eventually this Nazi forces her to come to like this dinner meeting type thing with Joseph Goebbels. I believe it's Joseph Goebbels. I don't know how you exactly say, but he is the I believe like the main guy in charge of propaganda during this Nazi time. And there's a Nazi movie that's coming out, and they wanna and this Nazi, like I think he's like a general or like a sergeant. I don't know what he is, but he's not a general, but I think he's somewhat higher. He's higher up than most Nazi guys, and he wants this new movie coming out about him to be played in Shoshana's movie theater. So he talks to Joseph Goebbels, who's the main guy in charge of all of this, and that's when Landa comes in. And Landa comes into this meeting, and everyone ends up leaving. The Joseph and this other Nazi guy that's like in love with Shoshana leave, and then we get this amazing scene between Shoshana and Hans, and it's just such a good scene. Oh my God, there's so many things that play into the scene. I mean, the tension you feel in the silence, because we know damn well Hans knows that this is Shoshana. Shoshana, after she escaped that day, she took on a different identity. She changed her name and all that. But Hans knows that this is Shoshana. And a detail that I forgot to mention about that day when Hans was in that house and Shoshana was there. Those were all dairy farmers. Lapadite was a dairy farmer. Shoshana her family were dairy farmers, so they had cows. And so Landa, when he walked into Lapadite's house, the first thing that he asked for was a glass of milk because they're dairy farmers, and so he wanted to try their milk. And so he had a glass of milk, he drank it all, and man gulped it. And then again, years down the line, when he meets Shoshana again, and they're at this like fancy restaurant after everyone had left, Hans told her to stay back because he wanted to talk to her because this new Nazi movie is gonna be held at her movie theater. So he just wanted to talk with her under that premise. Obviously, we as the audience know that Landa knows that this is Shoshana, but he just wants to fuck with her. This is the thing about Landa. He just wants to fuck with people. He loves to troll people. He's like, he's just so good at it, just playing with his food. And so he's talking with her, and like a waiter comes up and he's like, okay, what would you guys like to eat? And he orders strudel for the both of them. And first of all, here, this is another thing about the strudel, but we're talking about this. And then he orders, I don't know what he orders to drink, but then he orders for Shoshana. He's like, the lady will have a glass of milk. He orders a glass of milk for Shoshana. as a way to let her know that he knows that, yeah, I know who you are. I know you're a dairy farmer. I'm not going to kill you yet, but I know who you are. And then he orders strudel, which is a type of a dessert pastry, and he orders whipped cream on it. But at the time, there was a shortage on, I think something, I think dairy, so it wasn't actual whipped cream. The whipped cream was made out of like pig fat or something out of pig, the whipped cream itself. And he knows that she's Jewish and that she can't eat that type of stuff because it's against religion to eat, I think, anything pork or anything that's like not kosher or something like that. But he forces her to eat it. He straight up forces her to eat the strudel with this stuff on it that she can't eat because it's not part of her religious practice. And it's just such a crazy scene. And another scene that I absolutely love is the scene in the bar with Hold on, let me look up the characters for this because I'm forgetting. Okay, sorry, I found it. I love the scene in the bar with that famous German actress. I forget her name, but she was a famous German actress, and you have a Michael Fassbender character in that scene. Um, and I just love that scene because once again, the same thing with the Hans Landa scene. There's just so much tension that builds up. The quiet moments when they're not talking, and then obviously the famous part where Michael Fassbender is playing as a spy. He's a double agent. He's actually an English soldier, but he knows how to speak German. So he was sent there by the English army to like just infiltrate, and so he's pretending to be an SS officer, but and he speaks really good German, but a lot of the other actual German, like the actual Nazi officers there, can tell that, okay, this guy has a weird accent. He has good German, but we can tell his accent is a bit different. And so they pick up on that, and this one SS officer really picks up on it, and they have this really intense scene where they're just like this actual Nazi officer is grilling him, and eventually Michael Fassbender's character gives himself away because he throws up, because they're in a bar, so they're ordering drinks, and so Michael Fassbender's character says three Gleisen, I believe that's how you say it, but he throws up like the English three, like with like what he throws it up. I'll put it up on the screen right now so you guys can see, but he throws up the three fingers on his hand, but he doesn't do it the way that Germans do it in Germany, right? In Germany, they throw up the number three with their hands differently, and that's how he gives himself away. And it's like those small details that it's like, wow, that's how he gives himself away. The way he threw up the number three sign on his hand, that's how he give. It's just like small little details that, as the audience, you don't know in that moment, and then later Quentin Tarantino tells you, because then eventually you find out that that's why he gave himself away. That's just another amazing scene. I'm sorry I went fully in depth into this movie, but this is my favorite movie. So now that we talked about all the movies, I think we should just talk about things that kind of show up on each movie. One of the main things is that in Quentin Tarantino is from these four movies that I watched, I realized that he has amazing dialogue. His dialogue is so good, and I think it really showed itself in Pulp Fiction. I think in Pulp Fiction, the dialogue that we see between Vincent and Jules is just A tier. It's S star tier. Like it's the best dialogue I've heard in almost any movie. Honestly, the dialogue is just fucking amazing, and like that's just peak dialogue. Another thing that I realized is that he loves to do his movies in pairs, like not pair, but well, I worded that wrong. But he loves to do his movies, and the main protagonist, he likes to like do to like he likes to do like duo movies, like where it's two main protagonists, two main characters that we follow. You know, in Pulp Fiction we had Jules and Vincent. In Inglourious Bastards, we had multiple main characters, but we had like the Bastards, which was a group of like guys, um, part of the American army that were in France, killing Nazis. So that's where they're called. They're called the Bastards. And then we have Hans Landa and then Shoshana, which are like all the main characters. Inglourious Bastards is the only one that doesn't really follow that same theme of like two main characters that we follow throughout the movie. But it's still multiple main protagonists, multiple storylines that we have to follow, which is cool. And I'll touch on that more in Inglourious Bastards. But a better example would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth, two main characters that are really connected, that we follow both of their stories simultaneously because they're like best friends, so we see them all the time. And then in Django, you have Django and Dr. King Schultz. the two main characters, like two duo, the duo that we follow throughout the story, right? I mean, it's such an amazing story, and so we watch both of them throughout the story because they're together, they're helping each other and all that. So he loves to do that, and another thing that I noticed is the music in his movie is so good. Like in this scene, a good example would be when Landa is reintroduced and he comes back in and sort of like a jump scare. It's like, oh, who is this guy? And the way it pans up, like I'll put in the scene right now so you guys can see it.
Ah, Landa, da sind Sie ja.
Emmanuel, voici le colonel SS Landa. Il sera chargé de la sécurité pour la première.
Enchanté, mademoiselle.
And that's the scene. Obviously, just like the music choice is just very strong. Just like it's really able to, the music that he chooses is able to capture the emotion of what's happening on screen. And I also love the music choices in Django. A lot of the music there is amazing. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else to like really touch on that really shows itself in all these four movies. I don't know, just the storytelling in general is great. The directing, the acting is always top tier. The story that's being told in general is always amazing. Oh, sorry, I had to yawn there. But yeah, those are the main things that I really see across all those four movies. And going a little bit more in depth into each movie, one thing that I wanted to touch on Inglourious Basterds is that Quentin Tarantino is able to so magisterially just able to follow the story of these different characters. I mean, he wrote Shoshana, he wrote Landa, he wrote the Bastards, Brad Pitt's character, and we're able to follow each one, and we're able to really go far into each one's story. You know what I mean? It's not like one is like less developed than the other, right? And that's really hard to do, to write multiple characters into this story and really follow them and really flesh out each of their stories. But but at the same time, it's also, he was able to do that because the story itself that he was telling was able to do that because they all had a common goal. Shoshana was going to do this movie premiere, but her main plan was to actually have all the main Nazis, Hitler, Goebbels, all these guys in this movie theater and kill them all, burn down the movie theater, and in the process end up killing herself, but he wanted to kill them all. And the Bastards also wanted to do the same plan. And it's so cool how we can see, like, because the Bastards knew that all these high-ranking Nazi officers were going to be in this movie theater all at the same time, so they wanted to go there to try and kill them all. And it's crazy how Shoshana, the Bastards, like these characters, even though they don't know each other, they've never met, they're all connected by this one guy, Hans Landa, because he's their main he's their main antagonist, and he connects them. But at the same time, they're all connected off of this one singular event that's happening of this movie theater, this movie premiere at this movie theater. They're all connected through that, and that's their main goal, to kill all those Nazis in that movie theater. And it's just so cool to see that when you really like think deeply about this movie. It's like, that's just crazy to think, you know, like they're all, like they don't know each other, but they're all connected through this one thing. And that just goes to show the amazing story writing, the amazing storytelling that Quentin Tarantino has. And that's one little in-depth thing that I wanted to go into in that. And with Django, I think I just really love, I don't know, what I love about Django, and one small in-depth aspect that I want to go into, is the character of Django. I absolutely love that character, and I also love the character of King Schultz. I liked King Schultz more than Django, but I love both of them. Both of them are amazing, well-written characters. It's just, with Django, it's like he goes from this like shy, intimidated slave, and then he's able to progress. You can see the progression of his character as he turns into this more confident guy, especially when he's playing the role of a slaver. He's playing the role of this black slaver that takes in like these fighting slaves. And we get to see how that progresses and how his character progresses in confidence with all that. And I love King Schultz's character because he's such a genuine guy. He's such like an honest, nice guy. And I absolutely love that. Because, you know, we don't get to see that too often, but, you know, we see that here. You know, this guy is just a genuinely nice guy. He's not racist like most people are during that time. He sees the good in people. And at the same time, he's not a pushover like we see in that scene where he kills Candy. I mean, what a scene. Yeah, I think what really stands out from that movie is the partners, like or not the partners, but the duo of Django and King Schultz. That's the thing that really hits home. That really is the main pillar, main talking point for me, is that duo. And for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what I love about that movie is just the underlying detail that all of this, when we go through this story of Sharon Tate and Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton, we go through the story, we learn about more about Rick Dalton and how his career is on the downfall, but he's able to go back up through spaghetti westerns and Cliff Booth and all that. And by the end of the movie, we know as the audience, if we did our research, we know what happened in real life. We know that Sharon Tate in real life got murdered, and it didn't end this way. And Quentin Tarantino knows that. And the movie ends with, Rick Dalton and Sharon Tate talking, and they're in like the driveway because of the crazy shit that happened that night. And they're talking, and then they go into Sharon Tate's house, and the movie ends with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming up on the screen. And that's not just because the movie's ending and he wants to show, like, the title of the movie. It truly is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because in real life, that's not how it ended. It ended much sadder than that. And I think this is sort of like a love letter to Sharon Tate, because apparently Quentin Tarantino, I mean, he had a crush on her as a kid, and I could imagine why. I mean, she was a very attractive young woman, and she has such a sad story because she was murdered at such a young age, and she was pregnant, and she had so much ahead of her, and it's such a sad story. And this movie is sort of like I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like a what if story, a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's why, I mean, that's why it's named like that, because it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sharon Tate survived that night, lived on the rest of her career, and became a great actress, had kids, whatever. It's a sad story when you really think about it. But at the same time, it's such a fun movie, right? And I love movies like that have underlying tones. If you look deep into it and you do the research and you find out more about what actually happened that night, you realize, like, this is sad, man, because in real life, it didn't end like this. In real life, human beings, innocent people, got murdered for no reason. It's a shame. It's a real sad story in real life. And this movie, because of that, because of what happened in real life, makes it also sad, because it's like, yeah, the movie itself is a fun movie. We get a happy ending, but we realize and we know as the audience, like I said, if we did the research, we know that in real life, we didn't get a happy ending. In real life, it was a very sad, disturbing ending. And so that's why Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is such a good movie, because it's like, it's able to use real life things that happened in real life events, and use it to shape, and Quentin Tarantino uses that to shape his movie. And I feel like I'm just going in circles here, but I'm really trying to, break down what I find really cool about this movie and go in depth into that main aspect. And the main aspect that I love about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that fact. The fact that in real life Sharon Tate died, in the movie she survived, but I mean, like the movie says, this is just Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sharon Tate survived and lived her life. So, yeah, that's that. And with Pulp Fiction, moving on to Pulp Fiction, what I loved about that movie is the dialogue. I mean, the dialogue, and also the duo of... And there's just so many things that I loved. It's the dialogue, the story itself, the duo of Vincent and Jules. It's just amazing. But I think, all in all, the most important thing that I got out of the movie is the dialogue. I mean, the scenes of them talking between Jules and Vincent, and not just them, but more... I mean, it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's magisterial, like this video is called Magisterial. It's magisterial because it's just amazing writing. The dialogue is second to none. It's like there's no other movie that I've watched, and I've watched many, that really it comes close to the dialogue that we hear in Pulp Fiction. It's on another level. I could go in depth, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the dialogue scenes that we get in the beginning of the movie with those two robbers, the dialogue overall that we get throughout the movie between Jules and Vincent is amazing. The dialogue that we get, between Vincent and himself, like the things that he says, the phrases and all that. And I mean, there's a reason why this movie is like, there's so many recognizable scenes, so many scenes that like everybody knows, because the dialogue is just so fucking good. So that's that. I mean, there's not much else to say besides that. And to just recap and just end this all in a nice bow, I think to go through all of them, I watched Django first, then I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, then Pulp Fiction, and then Inglourious Bastards. And I think what I got out of Django at first when I saw that movie, that was like my favorite movie. Then I watched like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then I was like, I like Django better, but I still like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And then I watched Pulp Fiction. I'm like, wow, I think I liked Django better than Pulp Fiction personally, and I think I like Pulp Fiction better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I think Pulp Fiction, objectively speaking, is the better movie than those three. But subjectively, I like Django better. But then I watched Inglourious Bastards, and I absolutely love that movie. That is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. Subjectively speaking, objectively, I think Inglourious Bastards is better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Django. But I think Pulp Fiction is just at the top. Pulp Fiction is like the Mona Lisa of all those. It's better than those. But what I got out of each movie is that from Django, what I got out of it is that Quentin Tarantino's writing of this duo, like he loves to write duos, right? As his main leads, like just two characters that we follow. And I think it really showed itself there. I mean, the chemistry we got between Jamie Foxx and Christopher Waltz as Dr. King Schultz and Django was just absolutely top tier. It's the best duo that we see out of these four movies that I'm talking about today. It really is. It's better than, in my opinion, it's better than Vincent and Jules. And now that's not to say Vincent and Jules isn't a good duo. It's an amazing duo. But I think Django and Dr. King Schultz just has such a much better relationship. I don't know. It's just so much more pure and sadder because in Pulp Fiction, Vincent dies, but like Jules doesn't really give a fuck. We don't see that, but we see that in Django, King Schultz dies, and it's a sad because like he built up like the things that he did for Django. It's such a sad thing that he died, but that's what I got that duo. Out of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like I said, what I got out of it was just the sadness. It was a sadness because in real life we know that Sharon Tate died, but we know in the movie she survives, but it reminds us of the real life horrors that happened. So that's what I got out of it. The story itself, just that it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a what if story, and that's the main thing that I got out of it. It's hard to expand now in this quick form, but that's what I got out of it. Out of Pulp Fiction, like I just recently mentioned, it was the dialogue and the duo of Vincent and Jules. Uh, the dialogue is the best dialogue that I've ever heard in a movie. It's just out of this world, and the duo of Vincent and Jules is just amazing. That's for Pulp Fiction. For Inglourious Bastards, what I got out of Inglourious Bastards was just the tension in so many scenes and the writing. Just these interesting details and facts that us as the audience doesn't know if we watch it again. If you watch the movie multiple times or watch YouTube videos that break down a lot of these scenes, it's just these underlying details that we don't know, but once you figure out, you're like, whoa, that's crazy. So that's what I loved. I also loved the writing of Hans Landa. I think Hans Landa is one of Quentin Tarantino's best written roles. And there's a reason why Inglourious Bastards almost didn't become a movie, because the role of Hans Landa was such a hard role to fill. He couldn't find anyone that could speak multiple languages, that spoke German fluently, that spoke English, French, and a guy that was able to capture Hans Landa until he found Christopher Waltz, and he captured it so well. So the main thing that stuck out for me was Christopher Waltz, Hans Landa, and just the writing itself. Just cool details that we don't know as the audience. Like one thing that even to this day that we don't fully know is Brad Pitt's character. He has this rope burn, like this scar on his neck. Like we don't know why he has that there. And just the details of Michael Fassbender's character throwing up the 3, but it wasn't the German 3. Like that's just a cool detail that we don't know. And then obviously the details of like Hans Landa and like the body language that he portrays, and like the fact that he's like this Jew hunter that's a detective that loves to play with his prey, and like all this stuff. It's just such a good movie. So all in all the movies are amazing. If I had to rank them objectively speaking, I think Pulp Fiction is number 1. Then after Pulp Fiction, I would have to say Inglourious Bastards. After Inglourious Bastards, I would say Django 3. And then last, I would have to say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, that's not to say that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood isn't a good movie. It's a really good movie, but I just think those other three movies are just better. Subjectively speaking, my personal favorites, I think it would have, for me, my personal, out of those 4, I haven't watched Kill Bill or Reservoir Dogs, so I wouldn't be able to rank those, but for those 4 that I watched, I think number 1 is Inglourious Bastards, number 2 is Django, and then probably Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then Pulp Fiction. Now, it might be strange that I put Pulp Fiction last, but Pulp Fiction is the type of movie that you don't really watch that often. It's a movie that maybe you watch like a couple, like once, twice, three times a year, because it's like such a dark movie. To me, it's dark. To me, I find that movie darker than Django. Django is a fun movie that you can watch, like of these two guys going through, you know, all this. It's still a dark movie, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. Pulp Fiction is such a good movie, but at the same time, me personally, it's not like it's not one of my personal favorites because I don't know. It's just it's not my type of style of movie. But I still love the movie though. It's like that's the type of thing. It's like you can recognize that it's an amazing movie, but personally, it's not a movie that I would watch too often. But it's still an incredible movie, a 10 out of 10 movie. I mean, objectively speaking, it is the best movie. I mean, it's non-linear storytelling. Its dialogue is amazing. It's duo with Vincent and all these characters and Jules and not just them but all these other characters like Butch that we get to follow, and the fact that he's able to go into detail into these characters like Butch, we find out the importance of his gold watch that his dad gave him. It's just like so many cool details, and I think Pulp Fiction it's a culmination. Even though Pulp Fiction came out before than a lot of the like Django and all these movies, it's a culmination of all the amazing things that makes all those other movies great. In Django, we get an amazing duo, amazing partnership between King Schultz and Jamie Foxx's character Django. In Pulp Fiction, we get an equally, maybe not as good, but still amazing duo of Vincent and Jules. And then obviously the dialogue is the best dialogue that we hear out of all these movies. And then you get an amazing story that I think all of these movies, like in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think that story is one of the best stories because, like I said, it's so sad. But in Pulp Fiction, we get it's like the Pulp Fiction is the best aspects out of all these four movies put into one movie, which is why Pulp Fiction is the best objectively. Subjectively, I prefer Inglourious Basterds and Django over it, but still, that's what I had to say. So that's gonna be the end of the video. We've gone 43 minutes long. We're gonna cut a few things just to try and shorten it as much as possible, but that's my breakdown out of all these four movies, these movies that I watched over the summer, this Quentin Tarantino binge watch that I went into, and what I thought about each movie, which ones I liked the best, which ones, you know, I liked the least. I didn't even touch on things that I didn't like, because to be honest, there's not that much that I didn't like about any of these movies, and it's like I would have to be like cherry picking or nitpicking to really find something that I didn't like. So that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed the movie, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll catch you in the next one. Make sure to subscribe and like, and yeah. Thanks for watching.